Okay, hi. It's coming to the end of June. This whole month, I've mostly read on my Kindle because I was overseas, so I didn't really want to lug any books around. So I just loaded up some ebooks in my Kindle and then I just read those. So this month, to my surprise, I managed to read 7 books. Probably because I was stuck on a plane, so I couldn't really do anything but read. But once I was overseas in Canada, I was so tired. I didn't have the energy to read throughout the day. I was just busy walking, trying to be present in the country that I am in. The first book that I finished reading was actually one that I read while I was there. What World Is This? A Pandemic Phenomenology by Judith Butler. So this is actually an ARC from NetGalley, meaning I don't think it's released yet. I think it's coming out soon. Yeah, to my surprise, when I requested it on NetGalley, I didn't think I would get it, but I did. Another thing that I was pleasantly surprised about was how readable her writing had become. So in university we read Her Gender Trouble Era. It's not like the most readable. I mean, the ideas are definitely valuable, but what I recall was my undergraduate brain having a very difficult time trying to understand what she was talking about. But in this book, What World Is This? Surprisingly, it was very readable. It was very understandable, maybe because the topic is something that is also a bit more accessible, like it's the pandemic. It is something that all of us have been living through for the past 2+ years now. For an academic, I thought that she was really clever because this is she decided to chope the corner of pandemic studies, and then she gets a word in before anyone else can get a word in. So anybody else after her who wants to sort of study the pandemic and write about it and publish about it, it's a bit hard for them to avoid her work. So she might actually end up being a prominent voice in this field now that she has said something, and said something so quickly and so early on. The best part, I think, which was really clever of her, was that she wrote very, very sensible things. Not to say that academics don't write sensible things, but what she wrote actually echoed a lot of the general sentiments I've seen floating around on Tumblr, on Twitter. It is definitely depressing content because she does talk about how certain groups in society are disproportionately marginalized, exacerbated by the pandemic. She repeatedly points out how people of color or people who are not as financially stable actually get hit the hardest because the system itself does not care about them, does not want to grieve them, and does not value their lives as having the same value as, let's say, a rich white guy. So I think it's quite good to have a reputed academic say all these things and point it out and kind of get the ball rolling for anybody who wants to talk about how the pandemic has only made clearer all the issues that we have already been having and have been avoiding. So I think that she will get cited quite a lot after she gets published. I fully respect the hustle. It's a pretty girl boss book to write. Next book, 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. It's loosely inspired by the myth of some people being turned into cranes by an evil witch. Of course, because this is modern YA, it's not like Jin Yong's A Hero's Journey or whatever, right? So they do subvert the tropes a little bit in that from the very start you are already told that the evil witch in question might not actually be that evil, even if her actions can be construed as evil. This trilogy follows this Princess Shiori. She is the only daughter in a royal family, so she has 6 older brothers. She has a stepmother who is very, very beautiful. One day she kind of discovers her stepmother's secret, which is that she's a magic user, even though their homeland, Kyoto, has strictly forbidden magic. After she finds out, her stepmother tries to get rid of her and get rid of her brothers. She does that by turning her brothers into cranes. She also sort of casts our protagonist out to the periphery with a wooden bow stuck over her head, concealing her face, and also for every word that she speaks, one of her brothers will die. So the challenge here, obviously, like in The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, is for this, obviously, the chosen one princess character to figure out how she's going to save her family without relying on her privilege, without relying on her royal background, without even relying on her connections. She just has to end up being a servant for a while. She has to face indignities because that is the whole purpose of it, right? It's character growth. And then during that, somehow her character is supposed to shine through and still help her rise above the ranks and earn a place in the higher rungs of society, from which she can sort of reinstate her own status and also save the day. So I just summarized the story for you. It sounds very general, but really at the end of the day, you know that she will save the day. What I didn't expect was the relationship aspect inside. I thought it was pretty well written. Like, I mean, it's definitely YA only, but there's a lot of like yearning, like hand holding. There's nothing like over PG-13, and I thought it was very nice how they took this guy is my betrothed, right? Like, I've been engaged to him since birth or something like that, and then they took it around and they turned it into like they become real lovers. Sometimes we don't need our princess to run away with the handsome stranger, you know, like there's nothing wrong with letting her fall in love with the person that her parents approve of. Just my 2 cents. Book 3, Heracles' Bow by Madeline Miller. So just like Galatea, this is a novella. It's very, very short. It's just like literally a handful of pages, and it focuses on this guy whose name I do not want to butcher, but I think it's ttys. It's very awkward to say it, so I'm just gonna call this guy P, okay? Let's just call him P. So if you know the story about P, he's the guy that they kind of got abandoned on the island by Odysseus, who then also sort of took his men away to go and fight the war, because this guy got bitten by a snake, right? And then the men were like, oh my god, he's going to die, and also he stings a lot because of the wound, so they just kind of abandoned him there. It was nice how they left the ending very ambiguous, and actually I was hoping that it would become like a full-length novel, because the myth does have several versions. So in some versions, he survives, and then when the men come back later on, they were like, oh shit, he's alive. There's also like the version where he dies, and then after he dies, that's not the end, right? You know, in like myth, death is never the end. Death is just the beginning of your journey. So I think that it would be really nice if this could become like a full-length novel. But then again, I think that the author is focusing a little bit more on the women characters in the Greek myths. It's totally okay, I'm alright. I enjoyed this even though it was just a little snippet. I'm just like really looking forward to her novel on Persephone. I think that's why I will read anything by her that comes my way, no matter how short it is. Anything is better than nothing, right? And I can't wait. I can't wait to read her novel on Persephone. I'm just so excited about it. Yeah. And like I just can't wait to like for it to come out, and then like to read it with all my friends, and then to hear everybody gush about the same thing, and there's this like sense of belonging. Quite fast today because honestly I'm very busy. I have a lot of things to do, and this month I don't envision myself having a day where I don't do work, because the workload is honestly insane. I did a touch up of some of the important things on my arm. You can see that my wrist is fully black. The flower is fully red now. Yeah, like I've been healing from this for a week. It's actually very tiring healing from a large skin wound. I didn't realize how much energy would sap from you. In my head, right, you think the skin doesn't matter, but when you have a wound and you're healing from it, it's like your body does not prioritize anything else. All the energy goes towards closing the fissure in your container. My scabs have mostly fallen off, so I think now my energy levels will come back. I think like healing from a tattoo is like walking around with a permanent debuff. It's really not fun, and I keep expecting myself to be more energetic, to be less tired, but it's not something you can control. Alright, so moving on to Ghost Music by An Yu. I read her other book, Braised Pork, a couple of years back. 2 years ago. I really did not like it because it didn't make sense to me. It was very 没头没尾. So when I was reading it, I was just trying to understand what on earth was the purpose of her husband dying in the bathtub. So that was Braised Pork. When I was reading Ghost Music, I realized that they are very, very similar in that there is a wife character and there is a husband character. And the wife character is someone who is a bit detached from reality. In Ghost Music, the wife character is somebody who is still recovering from being raised by her concert pianist of a father, who kind of expected her to follow in his footsteps but also become more famous. So she was unable to take the pressure and she dropped out of university, and then after that she's just been teaching as a piano teacher. and then she married this guy. He's a man who's a workaholic, who doesn't really say much, who doesn't really put a lot of effort into his marriage either. However, he doesn't just off himself, he actually just gets very like avoidant. After the husband's father passed away, the protagonist's mother-in-law moved in with them. After she moved in with them, the protagonist started to realize certain things. Like, she realized that actually her husband had a younger sister that she never heard about before. She also found out from like a friend of a friend that her husband actually had an ex-wife. Yeah, and then the ex-wife contacted her and told her that actually they had a son. So the theme is the same, right? It's about a wife who, first of all, is not really entirely there to begin with, just kind of going through the motions, getting married because that's what society wants her to do. Then one day she discovers, oh my god, I don't even know the man that I married. And then she has to deal with it. I think what I liked about this book was that there was character development, not like the previous book. The wife does... Oh, hi baby. Come. Yeah? Okay, my cat would like some attention and he would like to say hi. Say hi, baby. Say hi. You okay? Okay, no. Okay. Okay. Can? Walao eh. You! So naughty, stop it. Okay, I don't know what he wants. I'll go and figure it out later. But what was I saying? Yeah, okay, so she has character development and I really like that her husband didn't have to die. Obviously their marriage cannot really, right? Like, it's not sustainable anymore, but at the end of the day, they still managed to sort of work through their issues to just peacefully coexist. The protagonist also manages to sort of achieve some semblance of independence after having some kind of personal epiphany regarding her own relationship with the piano. It is a good book. What made me happy was to see how the author's writing had changed and had developed over time. Next book is book 5, The House with the Golden Dog by Elodie Harper. So this is the book 2 of the Wolf Den trilogy. That book about the women who were forced into prostitution in ancient Pompeii. Because book 1 ended on a kind of cliffhanger, like, it's such a fast-paced book that you don't even feel like you're reading that many pages, and the events pick up a few months after the events of book 1. And naturally, because this is a kind of like adventure twisty novel, there are a lot of betrayals going on. I've also really enjoyed like the portrayals of the British girl, the Briton, as somebody who is coded as trans mask. Good that she got a bit more airtime, and how her scenes were also kind of humorous, and she does come into power in her own right. Our main character, Amara, also manages to fall in love, and then she and the Briton and the man that she's in love with, they do form like a solid unit of 3. I thought that was quite an interesting family structure that they had. There's a book 3 coming up. The book has to end on a very sad and heart-wrenching note, which in a way is also a kind of cliffhanger, so that you will want to go and read the 3rd book, which I do. I want to read the 3rd book. I want to find out exactly whether or not she manages to achieve her happy ending. I also want to find out whether or not the Briton, she manages to achieve her dreams of becoming a world-famous gladiator. So I would say that this series is definitely not PG-13. It's a R21 at minimum. You know, it's never easy to read about sexual assault. It's never easy to read about PTSD. I thought that given how there was a potential for fluffiness and maybe insensitivity in this book, the author actually manages to balance both. She gives us the plot, she gives us the adventure, she gives us the tension, but she also does not minimize the suffering. It's pretty well written for a series. I really hope that the 3rd book does not disappoint. Okay, book 6, Peter Darling by Austen Chant. I think this book has a bit of a reputation for being like the trans retelling of the Peter Pan story. So Peter Pan is Wendy Darling's trans identity. And Neverland is a place where children or boys who don't feel like they belong in society can escape to, where they can become their true selves. When Wendy Darling comes to Neverland, he becomes entirely Peter. Throughout the book, Peter is not misgendered except for by his parents, because his parents do not see him as Peter. His parents see him as Wendy, and they refer to him as such. His younger brothers also don't refer to him as Peter, but as Wendy, except for when they are playing pretend. The premise is that Peter was reaching a kind of personal crisis at home. He was feeling the need to run away already because his parents were getting very, very intolerant, and he had two options, or either is you run away or you kill yourself, because the third option is being sent to an asylum where the doctor will try to fix you. So Peter was about to commit suicide, and then suddenly his fairy showed up and brought him back to Neverland. When he was there, he met up with his old rival again, Captain James Hook. Their fights get a bit vicious. There are many fight scenes. I just need to say I don't enjoy the fight scenes. I just think that I'm not the kind of person that enjoys seeing like the swords flying everywhere, and then they're like blocking here, blocking there, unless it's like wuxia movie and it just looks completely unrealistic, then I'm interested. Peter fights a lot in this book. They do feel something for each other. They love each other. That's the thing. But they don't know it. So this is clearly enemies to lovers. And then we also find out that James Hook was another runaway. He managed to sort of reach this amnesiac state where he does not remember his past, probably because it was too painful for him. After a while, James realizes that actually Peter does not know how Neverland works. He does not know that Neverland is just entirely made up. Even the Lost Boys are made up. And he doesn't understand that Neverland will slowly erode away your reality and also your memories of your past. So they decide to go back into reality together to start a life together, and they do. And I thought that what was surprisingly nuanced was when Peter went back into reality and he inhabited his old body, he no longer felt the need to change it. At the end of the day, they love each other for what's inside. Not every trans person wants to transition or wants to change their body, and this whole idea of feeling like you were born in the wrong body actually is not entirely true for every single person. Being queer is not something that you can pin down into one definition or pin down into one way of looking at the world. There are people who are trans, but they have no desire to change their bodies. And I thought that Peter being okay with his body at the end was sort of like a gesture towards that sentiment. Yeah, that's just my interpretation. I feel like this is a very good example of queer literature geared towards young adults. Okay, the last book over here, All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. I have enjoyed her works in the past. I really liked Miss Ice Sandwich. I also enjoyed Breasts and Eggs. I did enjoy Heaven a little bit, but it was depressing if you recall. But this book, it just seemed like it fell short compared to her previous books. Trigger warning, this book has sexual assault. The protagonist suffers sexual assault at the hands of a schoolmate. It's not pretty, it's pretty explicit. So yeah, this is just a trigger warning for any of you who were thinking of reading this book, because the title is kind of misleading, right? You look at it, you're like, oh, All the Lovers in the Night. Is this a happy book? But no, it's very, very depressing. The main character herself does develop by the end of the book, but I wasn't entirely sure what she was supposed to represent. In fact, I got the feeling that she was kind of there just to allow us to listen to the other characters' perspectives. So the protagonist, Idia, she has two friends. One is like Noriko from her childhood. One is Hijiri from her adulthood. And then they kind of represent like very different kinds of womanhood. And Idia, she's kind of like in the middle of it. She's like this blank canvas kind of character. Similar to the previous books, the other characters have a lot to say. So the protagonist just kind of sits there and listens to them say their perspective, and it's very obvious that it's social critique. So the author is just using this character to kind of like satirize and mock and critique. I guess that's also why I felt like the writing wasn't as enjoyable here. perhaps it's actually like a translation issue. The messaging comes forth so strong that it's no longer subtle. So yeah, it's still a 3-star book, but definitely nothing like her previous novels. I think like Miss Ice Sandwich is still the favorite book of hers that I have ever read. So yeah, that's it. That's what I've read this month of June. I don't have time to read in July. I literally do not. So my goal is to read one book. Just one. And I'll be happy. And then next month I'll just talk about that one book. That's it. I will see you in my vlogs and next month. Bye bye.